How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. This is Lemora's Cards, and today we're taking our first look at some Final Fantasy cards and their potential impact on cEDH. This set is going to be crazy. From what I heard, even just from the pre-orders, it's already the best-selling set of all time. I am very hyped for it. I wouldn't say I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. I have interest in the series, and there are some games that, I really like. Played a good bit of 14, really like 9. I'm playing through 10 right now. I'm starting to go through some more of them. I've played bits of a lot of them and just know a decent amount of the series, but I'm not like the most diehard. I'm waiting for the Chrono Trigger Secret Lair, you know what I mean? But either way, it's looking like this is gonna be a pretty impactful set. Hard to say where the power level is because this was, as far as we know, initially designed to be a modern set and then got switched over to being a standard set. So, maybe there's some stuff that's gonna slip through. Lots of new options here, and we're just gonna hop into it. If you enjoy this video, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below which of these characters' names I messed up the most. A lot of them, even in the games I played, I just don't even really know their names, so like how to pronounce them, because half of these games didn't even have dialogue, and then the other ones I didn't play. And even 14, which I played a lot of, I just forgot how to pronounce these characters' names, or I read them wrong. So there's that. But let me know which cards you're the most excited for. I will be following up on this when we get enough new cards that look interesting to talk about. But yeah, let me know what you're excited about, and with all that being said, let's go ahead and hop into it. The Land Go cEDH Expo is coming soon. May 23rd through the 25th in Nashville, Tennessee. A massive cEDH focused convention featuring a Black Lotus Invitational, no ban list, and other side events. And the main feature, a 2-day cEDH Open 10K, will be going down. Featuring special guests such as Winona Nelson, famous for Timna the Weaver, and Sierra Rush, and this exclusive event playmat. You don't want to miss out on this one-of-a-kind event. Find more info and get your tickets now at the link in the description below. So we're just going to be going in order here on Moxfield. Zack Fair, I think this one is just like maybe playable. It just being a cheap legend, maybe think about it. But for 1 white, you get a human soldier 0/1, enters with a +1/+1 counter on it, and you can spend 1, sacrifice it, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Put Zack Fair's counters on that creature and attach an equipment that was attached to Zack Fair to that creature. Barring some potential like niche decks that might run this that are actually doing equipment stuff. I think if this said hexproof and indestructible, the Sisei decks might look at it more. They run like 1 mana legends that kind of do a similar thing. If this one got around Summoning Sickness, unlike Squall, which has to tap to protect a Sisei, probably help more. This buffing Sisei's power even as it leaves is kind of nice, but I think this one's going to just miss the mark because there's so little removal in cEDH that's about actually destroying a permanent. It's almost always exile or bounce. But I don't think this one's quite going to get there, but I just wanted to mention it. And in general, I didn't put just every cheap legend on here, but if you see a legend, especially that's like 2 colors and only costs 2, if it has text on it relevant to Sisei, some of them might test it, whatever, keep that in mind, but I'm not going to go over all of those. Garland, Knight of Cornelia, Black Red, 3/2 actually. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Surveil 1, which is the Dragon Rage Channeler text, and then for 7 whole mana, 3 black, red, return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield transformed. Activate only as a sorcery. When it dies, put it on the, and it's just a 5/5. That's mainly like 60 card text. Heard some people kind of hyped about this. A cheap commander that does enable some like card selection, graveyard filling, does seem pretty nice for Storm. A lot of times, what keeps these commanders from being good enough is that they aren't big enough of a payoff, or they don't give you like mana and a payoff, especially in lower colors. They're not fueling you. Think of something like an Ob or Rakdos the Muscle that just keeps you going with actual cardboard. This one being so cheap might help it get there. My guess is that it might be fringe and it will be really good in some games, but you do need to just kind of have gas as it is for this to go, but it will like help you fuel your breach, make those breach lines a lot cleaner, stuff like that. So it is something to look at as a potential Rakdos Storm commander, or an okay card in the 98, 99 of some decks. I think a lot of decks would just run Dragon Rage Channeler, and that one's not even that popular right now. Tataru Taru, 1 and a white. When it enters, you draw a card, and target opponent may draw a card. And whenever an opponent draws a card, if it isn't that player's turn, create a tap treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So some people are calling this like a new Lothos style card. It is fairly similar. It's probably worse, but it is easier to cast, and it does immediately make a tap treasure on ETB. I do think people should just consider running it. Only 4 treasures a turn versus Lothos like million untapped treasures it can potentially make. Is a it's a bit worse. It does look good in some decks that care about cheap legends like your Sisei's. Looks really strong in Plagon. So I think this is a card you should expect to see play. How it compares to something like Lotho, I'm not really sure. My guess is Lotho is going to be a bit stronger. Some games this will get to trigger more easily, especially in like lower resource games where things aren't really happening too much. much. But even in those games, often people are just paying for draw engines anyways. So it's kind of hard to say. And it is one that you can trigger yourself, kind of like Fairy Mastermind, force people to do, or even like Smothering Tithe. But I don't know, something to consider. I think this is probably the closest to a generic staple that we've seen so far. Emet-Selch, Unsundered. 1 blue-black, Vigilance. When it enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Emet-Selch. So the front side, on its own, it's okay. It's a 2/4, so it's going to get to attack pretty freely. And when it does enters or attacks, you do get to loot, draw, discard. So that's pretty nice. And when it flips, it is Vigilance, 6/6. During your turn, you may play cards from your graveyard, so you have like Yawgmoth's Will effect. And if a card or token can be put in your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Again, Yawgmoth's Will sort of effect. So this is a Dimir Yawgmoth's Will commander that kind of fuels your graveyard, gets things going. It is in somewhat awkward colors or that kind of thing. It might just be an okay-ish engine that in the long game can get you there. 14 in your graveyard is pretty intense. I think you have to build around that a little bit. You want to just be like a Brain Freeze deck, maybe even running cards like Grinding Station or other random incidental mill stuff, maybe other graveyard synergistic stuff like, I don't know, Emery or whatever. Some stuff to get cards in your yard because 14 is a lot in this current format. Maybe you're also running like the Windfalls, maybe like your Careful Study type effects, things like that. I don't know how deep you go on it, at what point it stops being a thing. We don't tend to see too many just Dimir commanders really pop off because there's so many Dimir plus options that are strong right now. But he does have a really powerful effect, but he isn't really an effect you can fuel. So once it flips, you're just kind of stuck with what's in your yard there. You can't get any more into your graveyard. It is kind of nice that you may transform him, so you don't have to if you have the potential to like really fuel up a bunch of stuff into your yard and you kind of want to wait to fire that off. Then that's good flexibility too, just a little upside. How he's going to play out, I'm not sure. He's probably going to be decently popular though, because he does seem quite cool. And a lot of people don't really like the high color partner piles. They want to try something closer to this. So I think it could be a cool option. Matoya Archon Elder. Again, I might mess up names. It's fine. 2 and a blue, Human Warlock. It's a 1/4. And whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card. Main thing that pops out with this is for decks like Thrasios. Whenever you activate Thrasios, you scry. So that will draw you an extra card off your Thrasios activations. It may be on the slow side. I do think you need to be very Thrasios activation focused for this to make sense. Or you have to have some other synergies. If your commander surveils, which there aren't a lot of, it's like Glarb, a couple other ones because you can't run this in Garland. But I do think there's potential, similar to Lord of the Rings, which had a scry heavy theme in Simic, for this set to have a scry or surveil theme. So we saw a couple cards doing that sort of thing, and this seems like maybe it's a payoff for that archetype. So if there are more good scry and surveil cards and also payoffs for doing scrying and surveilling, then that might be a thing. As it is, it's mainly like Thrasios and Surveil lands, which there aren't a ton of, but if you get to activate Thrasios, draw an extra card, and you put a Surveil land into play, draw an extra card, that's going to feel really great. I'm going to test it, but it could be that it's just 1 mana too much, doesn't do enough when it comes down. If it like ETB surveilled, you know, it's a whole different card, but as it is, might not quite get there, but I think it is worth at least mentioning. Sephiroth. 2 and a black. Sephiroth, Human Avatar Soldier. When he enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card. Whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If this is the 4th time this ability has resolved his turn, transform Sephiroth. So as it is, he just is a way to get some creatures into the yard, sacrifice triggers, getting you not really card advantage, depending on if you're, you know, making tokens for those creatures, but he is a way to turn those bodies into cards. Eric was telling me something about testing this in Corvold, or that actually looked really, really strong in Corvold. And even just on that side, they also like having those Blood Artist type effects as a combo outlet for War and Soul Trader. So that on its own seems pretty good. And then when he triggers 4 times, or resolves 4 times rather, you get to flip him into Sephiroth One-Winged Angel, who has flying 5/5. As this creature transforms into Sephiroth One-Winged Angel, you get an emblem with whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that initial effect, and you get it on an emblem, so it's there forever. And then whenever he attacks, you may sacrifice any number of other creatures if you do draw that many cards. Seems like a pretty strong payoff for very token-centric sort of cards. Maybe your Marniuses, your Corvolds, like we mentioned, might be a thing worth thinking about. Just seems like a pretty interesting card. Not that many decks have lots of fodder lying around to be able to sacrifice stuff, so it does have to go into certain lists, but it does seem pretty strong. You know, maybe it's a Najila card, I don't know. Something to think about if you are making a lot of creatures, you are doing a lot of sacrifice stuff, already doing War and Soul Trader, that kind of thing. Just something to think about. Could be really strong. Kind of similar, but I think more narrow is Shadow Mysterious Assassin. For 2 and a black, you get a 3/3 with Death Touch. And whenever Shadow deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice another non-land permanent. If you do, draw 2 cards, and each opponent loses life equal to the mana value of the sacrificed permanent. I look at this as kind of similar to like Braid's Arisen Nightmare in the Black Malcolm decks. Other decks that are just generating stuff, again, like your Marniuses or your Ninjilos or whatever, being able to just get rid of junk and turn it into 2 cards is pretty nice. Getting the cards immediately each turn is kind of nice. So I think like Raids, when it comes down, is better than this because it basically is ETB on your end step, draw X number of cards, 1 to 3 cards. Whereas this, you're not going to get any cards immediately the turn it comes down unless you give it haste. But you do every single turn in your post-combat, you have access to those cards. Just sack, draw 2. And it's also known how many cards you're going to get, which is pretty nice too. Not like this is really busted or anything, but I do think you're in those kind of decks that has material lying around. You're going to combat, drawing cards, smacking people, getting advantage off of that. This might just be something to consider. Terra Magical Adept. I think this is one I really underrated when I first read it. And this is for 1 red-green, you get a 4/2. When Terra enters, mill 5 cards, put up to 1 enchantment card milled this way into your hand. And then for 4 red-green, you can tap, exile Terra, then return it to the battlefield, transform under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. And I do want to talk about the flip of this one because it's very relevant. It has 4 chapters. The first 3 are create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary enchantment you control. It gains haste. If it's a saga, put up to 3 lore counters on it, sacrifice at the beginning of your end step. And then the main relevant ability is add white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, and green, green, exile Esper Terra, then return it to the battlefield front face up. That means this is a 5-color commander, and it looks kind of goofy and synergistic, but it is a Gruul to cast, very cheap food chain commander. Do your food chain squee. What will happen is you get to mill your entire library, and then each time, if each mill you do, you get an enchantment, you get to put it in your hand. So you can run like enchantment creatures, like Perforos, for instance, cast Perforos, or if there might be another enchantment creature payoff that's like cleaner and or higher card quality, but you get to run some sort of payoff like that. And you also just get to be a food chain sort of hermit druid style deck. You might also build into that too, because things like Malevolent Hermit you can cast from the graveyard using Terra. You also just, if you have 2 mana lying around, get to mill your whole library and Underworld Breach, potentially do like flashback shenanigans, put Breach back on top, do it again. You get to keep refiring it. You're gonna mill over your Savine's Wreck, of course. It's just a 5-color commander that I think will overlap with lots of other incidentally good stuff. You can play it for value. I don't think the flip is going to be super relevant, but I think just as a 5-color commander, that combo is just Gruul. So just kind of get to build your deck around, sort of similar to the Tiamat food chain deck that we covered. That was like a turbo Gruul 5-color deck. You kind of get to do that, but also build your deck around maybe Hermit Druid and milling stuff, and you get, you're all 5 colors. I actually do think this one is pretty real as a potential food chain option, just because how it lines up so cleanly. And then beloved Final Fantasy IX character, we got Vivi, 1 blue red, legendary creature wizard. For 0, you can add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivi's power. Activate only during your turn, only once each turn. So decent restriction there, and he's a 0/3 to start. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. You, I guess technically at the end there, you have access to like a outlet to just go infinite, casting non-creature spells to kill the table. But he's also just a mana enabler. You just get to cast some spells, put some counters on this thing, activate it, boom, get blue and red. In terms of it being a commander, it might have the same issue that a lot of the other mana enabling blue, red, or less color storm decks do, like your Burgies, your Vadrix, I think it is, the other blue-red that's kind of similar to Ral. This just doesn't get you cards. There's nothing this can do to get you cards. You need to find the cards on your own. This can give you some mana, but it's going to take a little bit. It's more like a mana, I guess it's not even really a mana battery because it doesn't run out. It keeps the counters. You don't lose the counters when you activate. So this could be good. I've been hearing people talk about it in other decks where it also could be a pretty interesting option. Hard to say without seeing it. My guess is that as a commander, it's going to fall short the same way that a lot of those other decks that don't have a built-in payoff do. It's one of the reasons that I've really hyped up Ral as like a really good storm option, because it gives you the mana advantage and it actually has a payoff for you to do. This one has a payoff, but only once you go infinite. And usually going infinite in these decks, you'll just figure something out anyways. So that part I don't care about too much, but it being a mana enabler could be quite nice, especially for it showing up into other decks. Then we have Celes, Rune Knight, for 1 in Mardu. And then when she enters, you discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards, +1. And whenever one or more other creatures you control enter, if one of more of them enter from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this, I think, is really similar to like a Kalia style deck that has just this built-in sort of breach fuel and reanimation focus. It's going to help you refuel. Again, it just enables breach stuff to kind of be better and just find you gas when you run out of stuff. I've heard pretty high praise for this among Mardu players who are looking into maybe switching to this or at least brewing it when it comes out. Seems like a really strong option. I would not be surprised if this is actually a pretty good deck. Just lets you do a lot of what those kind of decks are already doing. So I definitely think it's worth considering. It might be really strong, actually. Use the link in the description below to download Whatnot, and you'll get $15 to use to buy Magic singles, sealed product. Get anything that you want, really. There's no limits. You just get $15 on the account for free just for signing up. Use the link in the description below. Give Whatnot a try. Then another one that looks kind of cute, but I think actually has legs, is Noctis, who is 1 white, blue, black, legendary creature, human noble, for a 4/3 with lifelink. You may cast artifact spells from your graveyard by paying 3 life in addition to paying their other cost. If you cast a spell this way, that artifact enters with a finality counter on it. This one does seem quite real. It has some pretty interesting combos. So Gifts Ungiven and Intuition get to set you up piles. I think it's Hex Parasite, which removes counters. You spend X and then Phyrexian black mana to remove X counters from a permanent. And you get to, like, LED, get you 3 mana. You spend 2 mana to remove the counter from it, and you get to infinitely crack it over and over. And then that, along with, like, Aetherflux Reservoir, just kills the table. You also get to do kind of cool stuff like have a Vexing Bauble and then a 0 in Aetherflux Reservoir. And you'll be paying 3 life as it goes. But because the Vexing Bauble will counter the 0 mana rock, it'll just go straight to the graveyard and won't ever get to see it get that counter. And then eventually just be gaining life off the Aetherflux Reservoir and kill everybody. Also just gets you generic value, being able to like recast your Lotus Petal, your LED, whatever, any other artifacts from the yard. You could go like a KCI kind of route with Quarkclan Ironworks. It just seems quite good having a Esper deck that has so much power with intuition and Gifts Ungiven, stuff like that. It kind of reminds me of Tameshi in some regards, but you're in an Esper pile, so you get access to more tutors. I think it's probably less explosive than that deck, but the comparison of Underworld Breach in the command zone is kind of there in Esper in a different way. But I think this is a pretty real one too. Esper piles are just generally pretty good, depending on the metagame. And this one enabling a bunch of combos and potentially value as well. Just something to look at. And it's also really cool. I think this art is sick. Squall, this one might be a 1 mana too much, but for 2 white black, you get a 3/4, and whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains a double strike until end of turn. And whenever Squall does combat damage to a player, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you swing with Squall on its own, it gets double strike. You hit a player twice, and you get to return 2 permanents with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Like I've been mentioning, so do these Timna style decks. That might be good enough. That is a lot of value if you actually get to do that. It might not quite be good enough there, but I did want to mention it because these kind of farmy synergy style decks that just, get tons of value are a pretty common thing in our format. Probably a mana too much, but the effect of like anytime this swings, it's a double Sun Titan. That's pretty hot. And then we got Y'shtola, I think is how you pronounce it. It's either that or Y'shtola. And I played a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and I just don't remember how to pronounce this character's name. But for 1 in Esper, Vigilance, 2/4 Cat Warlock. At the beginning of each end step, if a player lost 4 more life this turn, you draw a card. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. I've seen this one a bunch. I've played against this one a bunch. It doesn't seem that good. Someone might figure it out and just grind with it and really put in the work and figure something out. It feels like the juice isn't quite worth the squeeze, and the synergy on top of a 4 mana commander just to get value. There's like these 3 pips. It just seems like a lot. Like the cards that help enable this don't exactly fuel the rest of what Esper is trying to do that often. So I think it could be a worthwhile commander, and it could be good into a really, grindy kind of game. But there are some hoops to jump through. The card quality maybe has some issues with it. Worth considering, I think. People are going to try to make this Cat Girl Warlock work, of course. But this is one of the only ones I actually have a lot of experience with, and so far it has been pretty underwhelming. Kefka, Court Mage, for 5 mana, 2 in Grixis. You get a 4/5, and whenever it enters or attacks, each player discards a card. Then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. on its face, it's 5 mana, ETB or again or attack. We all go down a card. I play a card, I go down a card, everyone else goes down a card. And then you have this little mini game. People might start showing each other what they're going to discard to lower the amount. You're probably, you're drawing 1 to 4 cards. I'm going to assume it's closer to that like 2-ish range. But in that exchange, you go pretty high up in card advantage. And then every time you attack, you get to do the same thing. So I do think the resource advantage is actually pretty significant that it will provide over the course of a game. And then for 8 mana, each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice, and then you transform Kefka, and it becomes a flying 5/7. Whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards, which is potentially a whole lot of cards, depending on how you're building your deck. Kefka does not exile itself when it transforms. Won't have Summoning Sickness. Like if you play it, do the thing, ETB, go to your next turn, flip it, go to combat, smack somebody for 5, you draw 5 cards because it won't get Summoning Sickness. How much you can build around the second part, I'm not really sure. That's pretty intense. It also is like 8 mana, put it on the stack, hope they don't remove my Kefka in response. So I do think you're mostly front loaded. You got to care about the front side to want to run this. It might be pretty good in a Grixis sort of mid-rangey pile. Has built-in card advantage, fuels graveyards a bit for your meme bet and, for your own breach, though that's a little bit smaller. Does let you do some Displacer Kit and stuff. I think this is closest to like Tevish Crom in terms of what I would compare this to. Maybe the backside is kind of like your Tevish ult, which hopefully wins the game, but it's probably a lot more fragile than that is. But it does seem like a pretty cool option. I know people are going to try it, as with a lot of these like really iconic characters. For the rest of our stuff, creatures is where the hottest stuff is, but we're going to talk about Commune with Beavers for a green. Sorcery, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact, creature, or land from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. We've seen a couple green cantripy effects. None of them are really good enough. Often cantrips on their own aren't that great. I think if you're in a lower color deck or just a deck that makes a lot of green, this is something to think about. I was looking at my deck, which usually has green mana lying around, and it's like 62 or something hits. So the odds that you see one in the top 3 is pretty good. Putting it into your hand instead of drawing is pretty nice. It might be a card that you see. I don't think it's exactly broken, but a new cantrip in a color that doesn't usually get them is something to think about. And this one has enough card types, especially because so often cantrips, it's like you want to find your next mana source, especially in other formats where you're trying to find a land or interaction. So I think in blue decks, you'd rather run like a Ponder or something, or blue heavy decks, and even those cards in this format are kind of mid. But if you're very green heavy, maybe this is a card to think about. Then we got Snort for 3 and a red. Each player may discard their hand and draw 5 cards. Then Snort deals 5 damage to each opponent who discarded their hand this way, and it has flashback for 5 and a red. I think this is just an okay card for some Stormy decks. I think in Ral it's probably a mana too much, but maybe you think about it. The flashback is pretty nice, kind of similar to like, I guess, Echo of Eons being a wheel that can get you another wheel, or you just mill it over and it can be gas sometimes. This one is probably on the expensive side. 5 cards isn't quite as good as 7. It's okay. It might see some play in a couple decks. Just a card to consider. Fire Magic, I think, is quite good. I think a lot of people misread it when they first revealed it. For 1 red, this is a tiered card, which is a new keyword, which means you choose one of these additional costs to pay. So you can pay 0 and on an instant have this deal 1 damage to each creature. So for 1 red, it deals 1 damage to each creature. Instant speed. For a red and 2, you can have a deal 2 damage to each creature, and for a red and 5, you have a deal 3 damage to each creature. I think just an instant speed, deal 1 to everything for 1 single mana is probably pretty good. That's probably going to see a lot of play. It's not broken, but especially in the decks that are creature centric, but they don't run a ton of X ones. Like I think your Timnacroms might think about it. Any sort of Grixis-y mid-range deck might think about it. It's just, 1 red, get rid of a Bowmasters and an Esper Sentinel. That's already just pretty good. I think this is just one to think about. It's just so efficient, and the instant speed. Like we've had 1 mana sorcery speed deal 1 to each creature, but instant speed is just so much flexibility that I think this might be worth considering, especially on a modal spell that you can, if you need to, just buff it up to Fura, Faraga, or whatever, take out whichever you need. Espers to Magicite? It's either Magicite or Magicite, and it's magic, so I'm going to say Magicite. And this, another game, this is a Super Nintendo game. They don't read it. They don't read the words out to you. You have to just read it. So, Magicite. 3 and a black. Instant exile each opponent's graveyard. When you do, choose up to 1 target creature card exile this way. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's an artifact and it loses all other card types. I don't think this is like broken. I think it's just something to think about in a black control or mid-rangey shell. Sometimes you'll get like the crazy high roll of like a super powerful creatures in the graveyard, or somebody has a devoted druid in the graveyard because this just makes an artifact of it. Graveyard hate on top of you know, some high roll potential is just something to think about. It might be a mana or two too much, but it does do two pretty interesting things on a card. So if you got some flex slots, if you're really into like holding up mana, maybe you're like a black Thrasios deck or something, this is something to think about, especially that one lines up really well with like, oh, somebody milled over Devoted Druid or, you know, killed theirs in response to my Machine Gods. Let me make one. Similar to like Hazel's Brewmaster, but I wouldn't be surprised if it never saw play, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it saw a little bit of play, just some testing and like a mid-rangey pile. Blue Mage's Cane. This is the first card with the job select keyword. So for 2 and a blue, you get an artifact equipment with job select, which means you create a 1/1 hero token creature, and then you automatically attach this equipment to it. So basically for 2 and a blue, you get a 1/3 wizard, which has whenever this creature attacks, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from defending player's graveyard. If you do copy it, you may cast this copy by paying 3 rather than paying its mana cost. On its surface, it just looks like a bad equipment, but when you actually think about it as a creature that when it attacks, gets cards out of your opponent's graveyards, it's actually not too bad, I don't think. I think especially in lower color blue decks, could be quite good. Decks that don't get access to like the high quality black tutors, just being able to do that. You have some high roll potential, like hitting somebody's Nas for 3 mana. That's pretty nice. I don't know if this is going to make it in Rock Thrust, but if I play it, I'm down to spend 3 colorless mana to cast somebody's demonic tutor. I'll pay the extra on that. You know, sometimes you get something a little better than that. It just has a decent amount of flexibility. It doesn't have to connect with the player. It immediately does it. It also immediately cast it though, so there's no timing stuff you can really do. So I just think it's something pretty good. And if they kill the creature, you have this lying around in long games. You know, you can move this around, so they have to get rid of the actual equipment to get rid of the effect. I think it is just something worth considering. And when you're looking at these job select cards, make sure you're evaluating them as this effect enters the battlefield on a creature. Then we got a Realm Reborn. For 4 green. You have an enchantment that has other permanents you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. People talked about this one in Kennen or whatever. I don't think this is gonna quite do the job. I think at 6 mana, it's really easy to interact with. It's just an enchantment. Most of your permanents already tap to add 1 mana of any color. I don't think you're going to have that many permanents that don't do that, are enough to make this mana neutral or mana positive, or at least especially mana positive. Like if you spend 6 to do this and you net 2 mana, it was like a dark ritual. It was like a 6 mana dark ritual. And I'm not going to expect that I get to untap with this thing. I mean, maybe I do, depending on the board state. Or if I do, it probably meant that it wasn't that threatening. So it seems kind of iffy. Maybe some deck will make use of it. Maybe it will line up in a deck like Kennen, but as it is now, I think it's a little too expensive on a non-creature body that's just so easy to interact with. Get this thing beside you, it feels dumb, although you do get to net the mana. So I think it's going to be too much. I think it just is kind of reads really interestingly, but it's more of a casual card, I expect. It does really line up with well with cards like Smothering Tithe, for instance. That could be pretty cool. That's something to think about. And then lastly, we have Starting Town, which is a land town. This land enters tapped unless it's your first, second, or third turn of the game. And then you can tap to add colorless and tap pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color. So it is a City of Brass mana confluence type card that enters tapped after turn 3. So turn 4 on, it enters tapped. The beginning of the game, the first 3 turns, doesn't enter tapped. Pay 1 life. It's another City of Brass. Probably worth considering for some turbo decks that really like this effect. The game has slowed down to where you expect to get to that turn 4 a little bit more often. But if you are just jamming and you really care about the color fixing, especially in like really high color turbo decks, this might actually be worth considering alongside those other like niche cards that come in, like your Tarnished Citadels or your Fire of Industries. But something to consider. And then if we get more town synergies, it might also be a little bit better too. So far, those have been on the more standard focus, low power focus side. Alrighty, that does it for our first day of Final Fantasy spoilers. Let me know down below which of these cards you're excited for, what you're hoping to see from the rest of this set, and do you think these are going to have a big impact on cEDH? So far, I'm pretty happy with the set. The Commander product was pretty low power and just very casual focused, so that one was a little bit of a letdown, not too much over there. But there are some Commanders that I could see people figuring out there. I didn't want to talk about all of them here. There are just so many of them. It's kind of a lot, but let me know if you think there's something that I missed. You know, what else you're excited for in this set that's coming out soon. With all that being said, though, thank you so much for watching, and as always, go play cEDH. Have a good one, everybody.